Hello and welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing another paint with me video, so if you have your watercolors close by, go ahead and grab them, or any kind of paint, or whatever you want to do. I'm going to be painting some irises that have been growing in our front flower bed. These irises I was very excited to see. I noticed last August when we moved in that there was the foliage for these flowers, but irises come in all different colors and shapes and sizes and everything. And since they weren't blooming at the time, I had no idea what kind of flowers were going to be there. The previous owner had planted these, and I did not have any contact with this owner, so I was not able to ask them what kind of flowers these would be. But honestly, I could not have gotten a better iris, I think. These are yellow and purple irises. I'm sure they have a real name, and if I can find it, I'll put it on the screen, but I'm not really sure. But they have these bright yellow, it looks like tongues almost, coming out of the flowers. So I started with those, and then I built the flower up as I went. When I do watercolor, I don't like to do a drawing, any kind of underdrawing, mostly because I'm not good at getting the pencil lines out after the painting is done. They're hard to erase, especially if you've watercolored on top of them. You almost can't erase them at all without taking off the pigment of the watercolor. And sometimes, especially when painting flowers, the layers are so light that you can still see those lead pencil lines. I know some people use different kinds of colored pencils, but I find the waxiness to be a little difficult to work with, so honestly I just go for it and make adjustments as I need to. I do really like how forgiving watercolor is. Depending on the kind of paper that you're using, you can kind of flesh things out or move things around by erasing with water, as long as your paper is sturdy enough. And thankfully this was a nice watercolor paper, and I didn't have to do any erasing really. I could just keep building on the marks that I already made. So at first I start with building up the flowers with regular watercolors. Eventually I will go in and use pearlescent watercolors, which I love using, and they look really great. But for now I'm just shaping the flowers, kind of getting the general shape where I want each flower to be, figuring out my composition for the most part, and trying to color match the image that I took of these flowers. And you can see that this flower, specifically in the front, doesn't really look right, and that's okay. That happens a lot for me. I went back and fixed it up and made it bigger, so then it just looked more correct proportionally. And now I'm going in and doing a bit of the background. I'm adding some of the stems, and I'm just going through, and I've really been enjoying this just kind of blobbing technique for background foliage because I don't really want it to be in focus, so I don't want there to be real shapes or anything, and I want the flowers to stand out in that way, that they are sharper and more in focus than the background, which is supposed to look more blurry and in watercolor case a little more blobby. So I'm going in with that now. I really love how adding the background, it really adds so much to your painting, because at first all those flowers were just floating in space and they weren't really that interesting, but once you put all the greens in the back and everything, it really made those purples and pinks stand out. And these other tall grasses that I'm adding are foliage for spring lilies, or what are they called? Maybe I'll think of it. But they're the more spiky foliage of the irises, and then the spiky foliage of those other flowers that I cannot remember the name of, but they're like yellow and they kind of look like, I know some people call them trumpet flowers because they kind of look like they have a trumpet on the end. I'll look it up and put it on the screen for you. I really love the background process. It's one of my favorites. I think it's very freeing also, knowing that none of it's in focus. It doesn't matter, and it adds so much to the painting, but it doesn't matter in that nothing has to be really accurate and sharp. And just like that, the whole paper is filled. And you can kind of see that the flowers start to blend in a little bit. I haven't got them super detailed yet, so now I'm going back in with some darker colors, and I believe I'm also using the pearlescent colors here. So the flowers are going to be the only thing that are done in the pearlescent colors, and that's to help them stand out. And also I'm going back and adding more detail, more dimension, some depth as well, so that they stand out more from the background. A little thing I just did with my finger is sometimes if you're painting wet on to dry, you can kind of erase with your finger a little bit. It'll pick up the paint before it soaks into the dry paper, and I use that technique a lot in this painting. These flowers were also interesting in that they had purple veins on these lower flower petals. So the petal started out yellow and moved to purple, but then all the veins in the yellow part were purple, and I thought that was so pretty, and I'm very glad I was able to incorporate that into this painting. You can't really tell what I'm doing here, but I'm going back with that gold pearlescent paint and adding a little bit of texture to those little like tongues. Maybe they're fronds, I'm not really sure. That's where all the pollen is in the flower. I also used a bit of that white pearlescent paint, and you can't really see when I'm putting it on there. So if I'm ever making a mark and it doesn't look like it's doing anything, it's that white pearlescent paint, and it will show up later at the end where I show you in different lighting how those pearlescent paints look. Some of the brush strokes are really light, and it's because sometimes I just feel like there needs to be something, but it doesn't need to be that much, and there were all these really delicate veins in the flower petals, so I was trying to emulate that a little bit by just kind of lightly brushing it on there and trying not to use much pressure. Now I'm going back through the background and I'm doing a little bit more defining, but still not anything too in focus. So I'm just adding a little bit of dimension, a little bit of variety of color, but still nothing is supposed to look like, oh, it's this specific type of tree or this specific kind of foliage that goes to this plant, because that's not important in the piece. The only important part is the iris flowers. This has been something else that I've been enjoying lately, which is the background foliage and just adding these darker points of color over like the big blob that I did. So it's still not in focus, it's not really a shape, it's just kind of a little bit of a dab. It reminds me of Impressionist paintings, but even less accurate than those. These are definitely some of my favorite parts of the painting, where I can kind of zone out a little bit while I'm doing it and just enjoy the process of putting paint on the paper. And you can kind of see how those flowers they're starting to look like they're popping off the page a little bit. I wasn't quite satisfied with their poppiness, so I went through and I did a little bit of an outline because the edges of the petals are the darkest parts of the flower. So I went ahead and outlined each of them, especially that dark purple. On another note, I can smell the rice that I'm cooking right now. I'm very excited to eat it. I really like those dark lines and what they added, especially to that middle flower there. And this is the finished piece. We're doing the tape peel. Very satisfying, except I ripped the paper there. This painter's tape is nice, but it will rip the watercolor paper. If you go slowly like I'm doing, you won't rip into your painting, but be careful. When you're looking at it straight on, it almost doesn't look pearlescent, but then when you change the light or you change the angle in which you're looking at it, you can tell that they're sparkly. And I thought this was very accurate because the flowers looked a little sparkly, like the closer that you were to them, which is why I used the pearlescent colors to begin with. And here's more close up, and you can kind of see where those pearlescent colors are. And I think that adds a lot to the piece. Thank you so much for watching, and let me know what you thought, if you enjoyed me talking throughout this whole video, and I'll see you next week. Bye!